Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome back to Kertrats Productions. In this special video, I'm going to be giving you a bit of a spoiler-free review of Star Trek Section 31. The official release date for Section 31 is, of course, Friday, January 24th. If you are watching this the day the video is released, this is the day before that. So basically the screener copies were embargoed until today, at which time I can kind of share my thoughts and give a bit of a review. So first I'll talk a little bit about the things that I really liked in this movie. Of course, at the top of the list is Michelle Yeoh as Philippa Georgiou. I think that's not a surprise. She knocks it out of the park as always. She's an amazing asset to have in the Star Trek universe. I'm forever grateful that she was willing to come back to Star Trek to do this film, and she doesn't disappoint. She's wonderful in this. She owns every scene she's in. She's larger than life. Everything you've come to expect from Michelle Yeoh, including some amazing fighting. I don't think that's a spoiler. If you have Michelle Yeoh, you're going to use her in all the ways that she really excels, and one of those, of course, is in martial arts. So top marks for that from her. Absolutely. Now, the other thing I really enjoyed about this movie were the other characters, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise given the talent that is in this movie, but I was kind of picturing more of a Michelle Yeoh starring vehicle with kind of people in her orbit that, she really stole the scenes from and that sort of thing. But the characters in and of themselves, I think, are very good, very well-rounded, very ably played and well played by the actors that they have here. Some notable standouts. Casey Roll as Rachel Garrett, I think, is just one of my favorite things about this movie. She's delightful. She really brings some interesting things to that role. Carrying it beyond the seasoned captain that we saw in the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise. Here she's earlier in her career. She's a junior officer. She's not the captain yet, and she plays that very well. I think as a young Starfleet officer, she is perfect. I also want to talk about Sven Rygrock, who plays Fuzz, the Vulcan character. I learned from Barry DeFord that Sven Rygrock is actually a renowned voice actor, and that really comes into play in this film. He does an incredible job as this character who is very unorthodox, different in ways that you're not expecting for sure. I think people will know from the trailers that he's not your typical Vulcan for sure. So I'm not giving anything away there. If you've seen the trailers, you know he's not your typical Vulcan. He really brings something special to that character in a way that's very cool for Star Trek lore building, I think. I also want to call out the performance of Sam Richardson as Quasi, the Cameloid, whom we see in the trailers quite a bit. Absolutely wonderful performance by Sam Richardson. The only thing that I can remember seeing him in previously was Ted Lasso. He plays an extremely different character in that show. Here, he is very memorable as Quasi. Really great moments, a lot of fun. I was very impressed by his character in a lot of different ways. So, the characters in this movie are the thing that I loved the most by far. Now, other characters as well, they're more than just archetypes. I think they're very well-rounded, very interesting characters in and of themselves. Zeph is one that I was pleasantly surprised by as well. Comes across very much as, the muscle, the tough guy, but there is an inner struggle to him. There's depth to him that isn't immediately apparent, but becomes more apparent as the film goes on. And it is played wonderfully by Rob Kaczynski, who is also a huge Star Trek fan. And you can tell that he is thrilled to be in this show. He's never anything but extremely professional and really good in this role. So you can tell that everybody doing this movie is having a lot of fun as well. And I mean that in a really good way. They really throw themselves into the parts and really do an excellent job in bringing these characters to life. Even some of the more secondary characters I really enjoyed. There's one character named Dada No. I won't talk about the role he plays in the film or what he's really about. We've seen him in the trailers and in production stills and stuff. I will say that the performance by the actor is really interesting. It would almost be at home in something like a Star Trek Lower Decks, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a very good way. Very quirky, definitely an edge to him that is, like I say, quirky, but also very fitting in with this universe. Other things that I really appreciated was the fact that the story ended up being much more personal to the character of Philippa Georgiou than I was expecting. So yeah, there's a lot of very interesting themes at play with redemption and betrayal. I won't go into, obviously, the specifics of the plot, but it is very personal to Georgiou, and I liked that. It made it more meaningful, for the character and for the viewer watching it as well. The film has an interesting 3-act structure, very specific delineated 3 acts, that really kind of made me realize that the bones of what this project used to be are still very much on display here. So we knew that this was initially going to be a series, then it was kind of morphing into a mini-series, and then now its final form here as a made-for-TV film means that it has been cut down quite a bit. It's gone through many different iterations, as the director said in a recent interview. It's very clear that it has been cut down, and that shows a little bit, I think, in the pacing. There are subjects and themes that come up that they kind of just touch on and then move on to the next thing. And I feel like if this were more of its original kind of series or mini-series format, we might have seen more exploration of some of those ideas. Because it's this shorter 2-hour film, those ideas don't get the kind of exploration that you could do in a series with multiple episodes. It's still very good, it's still very interesting, but it's not as in-depth as I think it could have been in a different form. Other things I'll mention, Olatunde Osunsanmi does an amazing job of directing. He's a director who's proven himself time and again in Star Trek Discovery for sure. I always really enjoyed his episodes. He does have this tendency to make the camera movements really fluid and dynamic. And a lot of times that really works when it's kind of following the action, and it kind of makes the camera feel as though it's a part of the action. It's in the thick of it. There are other times, however, though, where it is a little bit distracting. And this happened a bit in Star Trek Discovery, kind of flipping the camera and doing crazy, weird things with it. Sometimes really works for what's going on. Other times, not so much. And it is a little distracting and took me out of it a couple of times. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the overall look of the film. This doesn't have the budget of a theatrical release, which is a little bit apparent at times. That said, the look of the movie is beautiful. I think they stretch that dollar quite a bit in a lot of different ways. There's one very impressive visual effect that combines practical effects as well that is just absolutely beautiful, and you can tell they spent a lot of money on it. It is absolutely gorgeous, but there are things like a limited number of sets. There's a bit of location shooting, and you can tell they did spend some money on this film in areas that I think were wise choices. A huge part of that budget, of course, is going to be Michelle Yeoh's salary. She is an A-list movie star at this point. Getting her to do this film probably took a bit of cash, and I'm sure a lot of the budget goes towards that. That said, I want to talk about the visual effects, specifically the exteriors and the space shots. There are some gorgeous shots in this film that I was frankly blown away by, and they have this real sense of movement and dynamism that I really appreciated, and kind of reminded me a bit of kind of the best fast-paced Star Trek visual effects we've gotten over the years, but also with kind of a sense of depth and space that maybe you get in something like in the Mutara Nebula sequence in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Very good use of visual effects, very nicely done. Nothing to complain about with the look of this film, with the exception of maybe some fast-paced scenes that use the shaky cam a little bit too much. There's a lot of movement going on at high speed in some parts that made me a little queasy to be honest. I kind of had to look away from the screen a couple of times. But that said, overall, I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was a very good entry. I think there's a lot of Star Trek fans out there that maybe are not going to appreciate what they're doing here. But as far as an experiment to do something new and different with Star Trek and not just follow uniformed Starfleet personnel on a starship, this is interesting. It's a very cool peek into a different part of the universe, and it's one that I appreciated and will watch again. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on the film. To recap, the characters were my favorite thing about this, and I think the biggest complaint I would have overall is that we don't get to spend more time with them. The pacing was a little bit fast. It kind of didn't linger on some of the character moments that I think it should have, which makes me just want more of them. Saying you want more of something isn't necessarily a huge criticism, I think. So those are my thoughts. I'm curious to see what everyone else thinks when it drops on Friday, January 24th, and be sure to tune in on Friday for an episode of Positively Trek with myself and Barry DeFord, where we really get into the nitty-gritty of this film and talk about specific plot details, pull it apart, and really kind of get to the meat of this. There's so much I want to talk about that I want to tell you, but of course, as I said, spoiler-free, not giving any plot details away, not talking about anything. There are surprises in this film that you are going to want to see for yourself before getting spoiled. So make sure when it drops, go watch it. Don't check out any spoilers. Don't do that. Go watch this with a clean slate and a fresh mind. And I'm really curious what people think. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Thanks, of course, to the Patreon supporters. I really, truly do appreciate you. Thank you so very much. To everyone else, thanks for tuning in and watching. I really appreciate each and every one of you as well. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on Star Trek Section 31. And until next time, as always, live long and prosper.